Shiva Mahbobi, you are the spokesperson for political prisoners in Iran, in particular for the campaign to liberate them. Now there is a new chapter of this campaign. What are you demanding?
Yes, I'm the spokesperson for the campaign to free political prisoners in Iran. I mean, today is the International Day in support of political prisoners, 20th of June. And it's a very important day for us because we have been announcing this day since 2010, and everywhere around the world in different cities we have events, seminars, and we are trying to be the voice of these political prisoners and their families. And I think this is important because in a way we are reaching to the public in different cities, different countries, to see what is happening in Iran, and also draw their attention to 37 of execution, prison sentences, and also torture that it's still going on in Iran. So it's quite important after the nuclear agreement to let people know this is still going on, and this atrocity that has been going on for 37 years.
Which sections of Iranian society are more targeted now in Iran?
I think I would say all of them, because even political prisoners doesn't mean that they are member of any political party. They could be a poet, writer, student, university students, lawyers, artists, all of them, whoever, homosexuals, women's rights activists, children's rights activists, whoever who are talking against the regime, not just against the regime. Like, for example, if a worker asks for their wage, if they want a right for strike, they're going to be under attack. So I would say majority of people are under attack, and any of them could be arrested any time.
Trade unionists too?
Trade union, there is no trade unions as such. There are some syndicates, but there is none because they don't recognize workers, basically organizations. And one of the fight they're trying to have their right. They're fighting for their right to have their own union. But union as such, like these countries, doesn't exist in Iran. It's not allowed.
But there is a social struggle, a workers' struggle in Iran. How is it organized if trade unions are not officially recognized?
Well, they have their public meetings in either in the factories and their workplace, or even outside of that. Just very relevant. Right now, one of their leaders is in prison, basically. Jafar, who is in prison and been on hunger strike for 50 days, more than 50 days actually. And their right is that they're saying that you accused us of acting against the national security of the country, but actually what we're asking is for our very basic right that has been recognized in other countries. So they do organize themselves as other peoples as well. Of course, in the law of the country, in the law of the Islamic regime, if 3 people get together and even discuss something, that's sort of, they call it an offense, and they call it basically a gathering to be against the national security of the country. So with that could be given, people could be given 10 years, 20 years in prison, or 5 years in prison.
I think you hope a change also in the nature of this regime to make it secular. Could it be possible, and how?
Well, I think people in Iran are quite anti all these laws, Islamic regime, because they're not following it. I think of course we are hoping, because if you see now, if you look at Iran independently, not following the mainstream media, there are lots of fighting going on. That's why we have thousands of political prisoners. I mean, in the workplace, in the universities, outside of universities, families of political prisoners as well. But what I'm trying to say, when you see this movement, when you see all these protests, you can see how Iran gonna go, definitely for a revolution.
But the Green Movement failed. Why?
Well, I don't call it the Green Movement. This is a name that's been given, I think, particularly from a section of that was People Movement. But that was People Movement that they actually the uprising in 2009, 2 million, it didn't fail. I think any young country that goes through revolution, they have different stages. They have uprising, they get suppressed, they get tortured, being in prison, and again, they rise again. But I think right now it's in a different form. That movement has been going on from the day one when the regime hijacked the revolution. It has been going on. As I said, if you don't have a movement and protest, you don't have a political prisoner. And that's a proof that shows that every single day people are fighting and protesting.
What should Europe do in this situation?
Well, if Europe, you means people in Europe, because I think it has
Also the institutions, I mean.
Yes, it has to be differentiated. I think the institution, if we meant governmental institution, of course, they need to isolate the Islamic regime from the international community, such as International Labour Organization and all other, and they need to put pressure on them, political pressure, on them to release all political prisoners. But we know that they're not going to do that because of their economical interests. But at the same time, I think there are lots of other organizations that they call themselves independent. They need to be able to put pressure on them. For example, there are thousands of political prisoners that are deprived of medical attention. I think there needs to be an independent commission that to be sent to prison. Regime needs to be put under pressure, that they need to come and view what's the situation in prison. I think there are a lot. Every revolution that happened in the world, every struggle happened, it was reinforced by the international solidarity. And I think we know that humanity has no border. No matter what happened in Iran, an insult to a human being is an insult to all human beings. So I think they have to be. And I think there is a point that public people in other countries can pressurize their government, can pressurize their MPs, then can they pressurize their institution to say you need to do something about crime against humanity that's been going on in Iran in last 37 years.
And about the nuclear deal, was it wrong?
Well, I don't know when you say it's wrong, I am not for economical sanction. I think it just hurt people, as it showed in Iraq, as in many other countries as well. I think with the nuclear agreement, many people, or actually not many people, regime wants to portray that, and also the European government, that after the nuclear agreement, everything is good in Iran. You don't see actually the situation of people in Iran in the news. But it's not true. Actually, even the economical situation hasn't gone better. The suppression is exactly the same. It just freed the regime in Iran to invest in different countries. But again, I have to say that I don't agree with, as I said, economical sanction or anything like that. But I think what they didn't do, this in the international organization and European government, they could have used that opportunity to put pressure on the regime to do something about human rights, to release political prisoners. But they didn't. They openly said that we don't want to jeopardize our negotiation for human rights. So they chose to that all these human beings to be killed and tortured and imprisoned, but they want their power back. So therefore, what I'm trying to say, that was the best situation to do that, and they didn't, and they have closed their eyes on what's going on in Iran.